welcome to Framework and our continuing coverage of the Bioware Omnibus. Today is the big one. It is the end of Mass Effect 3. The end of Mass Effect. One of the most controversial, memorable endings of any video game ever. One of the most hated, probably. I am John, one of the hosts of Framework. With me, as always, the other host of Framework, Al. How are you today?
I'm all right, man. I'm fighting off a little bit of a cold here, but this is just it's important work we're doing. It's very simple. This is Framework. We do the Bioware Omnibus. This is Mass Effect 3, part 3 of Mass Effect 3. Very linear, very simple, and we're talking about the ending of the Mass Effect trilogy here. Like you said, widely despised. And we'll get into all that, why and why everybody's wrong about that soon enough. We kind of have a little more third act stuff to get through here. I think we left off last time with the Sanctuary mission.
We were talking about the Sanctuary mission. I mean, it's the home stretch here. The notable thing about the third act of this game, it is a 3-act structure as a game. The third act is just like, okay, we're finishing this up. We're wrapping this up. Party's over. Time to go home. Kind of. It is by far the shortest by like a substantial margin. It is probably, I don't know, like the first couple things are about 15 to 20 hours, something like that. And then this one is, pretty much like 5 hours. Playtimes may vary.
Yeah, playtimes will vary a lot. But what's noticeable mostly about it is that like the first 2 acts come very like clearly with their own sets of side quests and their own like world state that resets. Like on the Citadel, there's different people in different locations. They're having different conversations, and different fetch quests pop up. And the third act sort of resets things, but doesn't really have any side quests. It's got like one of the N7 sort of multiplayer maps that they just throw into the single player game since they had the assets there already. But you're not really like the first act had side missions where you met up with Grunt and Jack, and the second act had ones where you went up with Jacob and Samara, and then the main missions, with Morden and Tally. And this one, I mean,
it's got some Miranda, but that's
Miranda's. It was what we dealt with in Sanctuary. Finally, she offs her father, which it feels like he's been built up for so long that we meet him once and he's dead in 30 seconds. And I think it's unfortunate, actually, a little bit. Miranda gets saved for the third act of this game, and because of that, maybe in part it feels a little perfunctory. It's just like this can't. I mean, one, like it's not as good as Jack's development from game.
No, this is Miranda. It's always going to feel a little perfunctory.
But I think maybe even it's hurt even more by coming after we've cured the genophage. And made peace with the Quarians and the Geth, most likely, or wiped one of them out. Like.
It's very much like, oh, yeah, Miranda, right. Her dad is an asshole or something. Right, okay.
The thing I want to highlight in the game, though, there's a really nice moment after this mission where you find Tally getting drunk by herself in the...
Oh, I remember that, yeah.
In the history room. It's a great scene, just like a funny performance for sure. But what the impetus for that scene is interesting to me because... she is taking Miranda's death especially hard if Miranda died in that mission, which is fairly likely. Or, even if she didn't, she's just, but if she died, like, even though she didn't like her very much, but she recognizes in this like battle Miranda was having with her father and his legacy and like how Miranda spent her whole life doing that. And this triggers some of Tally's own unresolved issues with her father's legacy. And it doesn't like belabor things trying to make out that those issues were the exact same thing exactly, but they're broadly similar enough to dredge all of that up for Tally. And it's good observant writing for a character who's been she's been so well developed over 3 games that now they figured out what her relationship is, not just to Shepard or to Garrus, but also like to characters that are 7 or 8 spots down the call sheet, like
the way this game these games really can just knock out scenes like this, that you are, completely cuttable. This would not have to be included by any means, but that they make time for this is what makes this feel so alive. It's what makes these characters and this world feel so cohesive and real, and serves as a very strong proof of concept for the TV version that we keep hyping up. It's all what you'd want. It's denser and smarter, and it's great character writing throughout this thing. And of course, you want to see this scene. This is a great scene to include. Yeah. Fantastic. There's a lot of scenes like this. This is a good example of it, though.
That is, one of the things playing through the Legendary Edition now that, the rap on Mass Effect 3 was always that it was the worst of the series. And Mass Effect 1 had some adherents, but those people were widely acknowledged to be difficult and insane. And Mass Effect 2 was the clear highlight for everybody, blah, blah, blah. One of the things that came across to me playing it all again this time, the stuff that Mass Effect 3 does not get a lot of credit for is just how well it is handling these characters at this point. And the additional, they said, Miranda's sort of part of that scene in absentia, but just the way the rest of the game has the characters interacting amongst each other outside of, they're not all just standing in a room waiting for Shepard to come talk to them or not.
They're moving around the Normandy. They're talking to each other in different rooms. And, I remember a scene between, I think it's Javik and Caden, I want to say, just like right in the middle of the rec room that I'd never seen before until this last playthrough. I was just like, this is great. And it's not even it's not even scripted. Well, it's a scripted scene. It's not it doesn't go into cutscene mode. It's just a scene playing out as you're wandering around.
There's quite a few of those. There's another good one in my last playthrough where I just found Ashley lying on the ground, hungover after Vega talked her into drinking a bottle of tequila with him, and Shepard just razzes his hungover girlfriend for a while, and it's just a nice scene. We talked about that before. That it's a cool mechanical innovation to have the crew moving around the ship or moving around the Citadel throughout the game and talking to each other more. But it's also, the writing is very well done. The character writing is at a, this is about as good as Bioware got at that. There's some great stuff in Inquisition or whatever, but we will.
No, I think
this is part of it.
Yeah, writing wise, character writing, interactions. I think this is the peak. I think. Not to say other games haven't built on this. I think Baldur's Gate does this thing very well, the new one. And, this is an important game, though, because of that stuff, you could argue. Yeah.
And before we get into the end game, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the DLC stuff. And the one DLC pack where that's most apparent is Citadel DLC really devotes itself to just doing the character writing stuff. I guess because it came out after the ending, like it didn't have to worry about plot anymore. And it was also sort of focused on trying to mend some fences with the disgruntled fans, that it goes in a more fan servicey direction. But it is a couple hours of just kind of very intently focused on party interaction stuff. And it's wonderful for that. But should we talk about Omega or Leviathan before we dive into the Citadel being the biggest of the three?
Yeah, briefly, sure. Let's start with Omega. It's the Arya mission. If you're not tired of Arya, you will be by the end of this.
Yep.
A character that I don't know. I like her in 2 fairly well. It's a smallish role, but I think at that point we're kind of supposed to take the badass posturing at face value. One thing I do like about the way she's used in 3 is it allows us to kind of see that to be a mask a little bit and to see her kind of struggling and desperate. I wish they'd gone a lot farther in that direction, though.
Yeah.
She remains a fairly shallow character who's, I don't want to say sort of a girl boss cliche, but I can't. She's darker than that. She's kind of a villain, I guess. Not really.
Not really. They don't really try and make you feel that bad about. I mean, on paper, I suppose she's Jabba the Hutt as a sexy blue alien lady, but
do that more though.
Yeah, I agree. It could be. Arya could be worse. You know what I mean? Like
Arya could definitely be worse. Yeah, Carrie Ann Moss is the voice that helps a lot. But there's potential to improve on this storyline.
Worse as a person, to be better as a character, I think is what we're getting at there.
Mainly, yeah. The main thing about this is just that it is long. The Omega DLC is a very long, mostly shooting-based DLC mission. Kind of like, I guess they put out 3. This is the one that is mostly combat focused.
It's mostly, like you said, there's not much in the way of lore here. It is just a ton of shooting. There's some new enemy varieties, probably a new gun that are in here. And I think the only interesting things about it story-wise are it's got an okay villain that that can live or die at the end. Based on your choices. But the cool thing about this is it's almost too little too late that it's in the sort of after release DLC for the 3rd game. But I wish I had done more of this. And I don't remember if we mentioned this in the first episode or not, but that the binary decision there of like, do you take this guy into custody and get intel out of him, or do you just kill him out of retribution?
Yeah.
It doesn't come down to like Shepard making that call in a dialogue wheel at the end. It's based on how you interact with Arya throughout the preceding mission. Sort of like dictates whether she kills him or not. And that's cool way that it's still ultimately decided by what you decide, but plays out a little more organically.
That's good. I mean, I guess that's fair because it is more about our relationship with Arya. This guy is Arya's nemesis more than he's Shepard. Shepard's kind of doesn't give a shit about this guy. And it doesn't matter. I mean, he's a plain Cerberus villain. You know, he's got like an evil man goatee and everything. So, you know, you don't really care if he lives or dies. He
plays space chess in his spare time, so you know he's a tactician.
Yeah, he's sort of an Alan Rickman-y kind of stereotype villain. He's okay. He's okay. I believe I usually keep him alive mostly just to spite Arya, who is irritating to me at that point. That's fair enough, and I like that the way it plays out. That is, I don't know. It might just be that those dialogue sequences and making these choices are a bit of a balm after like a 5 hours of corridor shooting, which is what Omega mostly is.
Yeah,
and the fighting in this game is great, so it's fine. It's fun to have more shooting, but if you played this game originally, you also had the multiplayer, which effectively did the same thing.
Right. And if you played this game twice, sort of back to back to do Paragon and Renegade playthroughs, then you got a little tired of shooting through all those corridors. But there's 2 other like really minor gameplay things in it that I like. One, just a sort of curio of I stumbled across a YouTube video where somebody did a side-by-side comparison that proved that, well, at a certain point in this mission, if you are a renegade and sort of have made Arya happy, when you're going in or just finished up the final fight or going into the final fight, she will grab you and like plant a kiss on you briefly. And that's as far as like the romance with Arya goes. But the actual it's not just the character model swapped out with the exact same animation. She holds the kiss a little longer on female Shepard. I guess a subtle indication that she's bi but has a preference.
That's great. How about that?
Anyway, and the other thing is there's a point in this where there's like some blah, blah, blah about force fields are being put up around you and you have to get them down to trigger the final boss fight or whatever. And there's like a whole section where you have to kind of fight off enemies while somebody works on this bringing down the shield. But if Shepard is an engineer, a technical specialist himself, there's like an interrupt you can do to bypass that whole section and just like interrupt the guy as he's monologuing and be like, yeah, no, I got this covered, blah, blah, blah. We're in. And it's one of the vanishingly few examples I can think of in the Mass Effect series where the class of your character like makes it has direct impact in that way. And you almost wish there was a little more of that. I feel like even like
That's cool.
The Baldur's Gate games, the original ones, like 1 and 2 had a little more of that. Like there was some specific content that you had to be a thief or a wizard to access,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the way that game would handle it is you just wouldn't have access to that part of the game if you weren't a wizard or whatever. That's just kind of the structure of those. And there's so much content there that, you wouldn't feel shorted. This, I don't know. I feel like at this point they're playing for such a big audience that they don't want to do stuff that is missable. Like, you want everyone to be able to access everything. And I guess in that sense, you have to kind of fulfill certain requirements to skip something, which is a little unusual.
Yeah, but it's just a little more shooting, I think, is all it amounts
Right,
to.
yeah, at that point in Omega.
But that is something that I think Mass Effect 3 as a whole is running up against now. That the idea to fulfill the promise that this series has been built on, which is this incredibly ambitious thing that we'll talk a little more about with the ending, I think. Just how insane it was to actually try this. But the problem they're running up to 3 is now to pay off the promise that everything you did in the first 2 games makes things so different. You have to create more and more content that more and more of the audience is going to be locked out of. And nobody feels great about that. The audience doesn't feel great about it. I'm sure the corporate overlords at EA don't like people spending time and money creating content that only a fraction of the audience is going to encounter. And it probably explains quite a bit about why no one's really tried to do this again after the Mass Effect series did it pretty successfully.
Mm-hmm. I'm a little surprised. I mean, these are influential games. People learn from them. People took cues from them. But the overall thing, no. It's just too irritating an undertaking, I think, to try to well, I mean, honestly, you're kind of a fool to be like, we're going to make 3 games over 12 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, the industry just doesn't really work that way. If the first game bombs, what are you going to do? You know,
they made 3 games over 5 years, which, you know,
really, this was a 5-year.
Wasn't it 2007 for the first one? And this came out, and 2012 came out, or sorry, Mass Effect 3 came out in 2012. I think Mass Effect 1 came out in 2007.
Jesus. Okay. I assumed it was longer. It felt longer, but time is weird, isn't it?
Well, because you've been playing this series for 15 years now.
It's true. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they're 15 years old now. Okay. Wow. Okay. Speaking with authority on it. Very good. I've played the game many, many times. I swear to God.
Okay, let's jump out to the other big DLC. The way I think of it canonically, the way I did in my playthrough is I played Omega during Act 1, and I played Leviathan during Act 2, and I would save Citadel for Act 3. So the Leviathan.
That's about right. Mm-hmm.
Leviathan. DLC. Yeah. This is where somebody is investigating something that killed a Reaper, and it turns out it leads you to the sort of source of the Reapers, the original organic giant squids that the Reapers base their mechanical squid form on. And this is, I mean, it's pretty heavy lore. It kind of like reshapes everything. It's a bit like Javik in that its status as DLC means that like the developments can't quite have the world-shaking repercussions that it seems like they should. Since it has to lift out of the main story without affecting the outcomes there.
Running into a problem with that all the way through this series, yes. But yeah, that is what's going on. It's one I remember feeling incredibly impactful and very, very. I loved this the first time I played it. Second time I played Leviathan, I was kind of just like, well, I know where this is going, and knowing how important it is, and it all of a sudden it feels a little bit like, you know, it feels like side content. It feels inessential after that, and kind of a neat swerve, but like, you know, something that, as you say, can be removed piecemeal and not affect anything.
Yeah, there are these sequences where you have to investigate this lab and are looking for clues and to plug them into a thing, and it's a nice change of pace the first time you go through it, like you said. But it does get more tedious. When you know where things are going, but you don't remember the minutia of which clue is where and in what order you have to enter them.
Right.
You know, but for all that, it does have a nice creepy atmosphere to it.
Yeah, this game's kind of, well, we'll talk about this when we talk about the ending and the Reapers. There is this obvious debt owed to cosmic horror that arrives in that first game, and it's shocking and it's great, and it is. It's a promise that the games just sort of, just by necessity, never can really follow up on. It's a tough thing to do, and you cannot just shoot Cthulhu enough times that his health bar goes down and you win. Like it sort of defeats the entire purpose of the idea of cosmic horror to be able to do that, and that is a problem that this game series has ultimately. Like, you can't really do what those things promise to be in the context of video game, shooter video game, no less.
Exactly. Cosmic horror can never be more than like a spice that is shaken on top of a shooter mechanic video game at its base.
Right. So it's an attempt, I guess, to get back to that a little bit, but give more answers. A similar thing. It's kind of just like, well, the more we learn about it and the more things we have explained, the less it functions as cosmic horror. But the spice is good. The flavoring is tasty. Yeah,
I like that. Yeah, and the underwater sequence looks great.
Yeah,
I love that bit when you kind of you take the mech down deep into the abyss sequence and meet the squids there. I mean, there is an annoying, the most irritating part of my brain that sits in the back and is really annoyed at like, so what are we saying here? Like that these squids, after being pretty much wiped out by the Reapers, now a few of them have survived for 500 million years now, further, and like without evolving any further, and
they're like crocodiles,
and like all that Reaper stuff is really still very fresh with them. They're not really, I don't like it's.
It's tough to write ancient consciousnesses. It's really difficult.
Well, and this, it ties it to Javik too. He's only 50,000 years old, but there is something a little janky about getting some. You want to interact with that ancient part of the lore, but also when you have to like, oh yeah, we've just been chilling for however many hundreds of millions of years. Like that's, I don't know. I bump on that a little bit. I don't know that there's a great solve for it, and I don't want it to not be there just over that.
Well, it's almost a trope at this point. Just like we are these great and eternal beings that actually can have no plot influence. We don't exert any power or influence. Just sort of watchers and observers, maybe, or something like that. That's what we're great about, and it's it's sort of inherently unsatisfying, I guess. I don't know. They make it creepy. It's cool to talk to them. Anytime you talk to these giant godlike figures in these games, it's interesting. But they are all still kind of chasing that first moment with Sovereign in the first game.
Yeah,
even up to the very end of this game, they're still chasing that a little. Yeah.
I think you're right about that. And the other thing about this is just because of how the game mechanics work, you do have to then talk those godlike beings into joining your side, and then they have to only be worth 20 war asset points.
We could add some more assets to your efforts. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, like I said, it sounds like I'm very down on this, and I think it's a good DLC packet. I'm glad it's there.
It is good. It's especially good the first time you do it, I think, is the deal with Leviathan. Like, first time I was like, this is one of the best I've ever seen from DLC. Nah, it's good, though. It's a solid one. But, it's not Citadel.
The best is Citadel. I love the Shadow Broker from Mass Effect 2. But Citadel, I don't know. It is so its own thing. I mean, there's a combat mission to it that is based around, you take the Normandy into the Citadel for repairs, and you get some shore leave, and Admiral Anderson gives you his just swank ass apartment to party in, which is nice.
Fucking Commander Anderson's sex apartment.
Oh yeah, his fuck that is incredible. But
one of the finest video game apartments I've ever seen. That's for sure.
It is sort of, but it reminds me of Lair of Shadowbroker in that there is this sort of much more cinematically built combat sequences. There's these, I mean, gameplay wise, it's always a little awkward to do stealth sequences in game engines that are not built around stealth gameplay, and so it's trying to do that when you're being attacked in the restaurant, and it's not my favorite combat necessarily, but again, the change of pace is nice, and just the cinematic it involves. In contrast to all the other DLCs, where they're noticeable as DLCs in that they tend to isolate you with like one or two new characters. Like Omega is probably the biggest offender on this since Mass Effect 1, like Bring Down the Sky. But and it's just like, especially the farther after the fact it is, the less likely they are to get the entire voice cast back to do like unique interactions for that additional mission content.
I hadn't thought of that. Yeah.
But that's what makes like Leviathan, it's kind of like, oh, Edie insists that she needs to go on this for reasons. And that's kind of because, well, Trisha Helfer was available to do more voiceover work than the Garrus guy or the Tally gal was. But Citadel is notable because in that it involves the entire crew. Even as it isolates you, where you don't actually, where Shepard's going around with one gun and no squad mates, he's communicating with them on the radio, and they're all talking to you and teasing you and stuff. And then when you choose your people, the rest of your crew is like on other teams that are running around the same level as you. And so you'll just kind of see them as you're going from place to place up on a different balcony, moving around. And eventually, they give you the money shot of everybody who's surviving on your crew showing up on like an upper level balcony to all fire machine guns down at the people who are attacking you at the same time. It's very fan servicey, but kind of came at a time when the fans had really turned on the on the series after the ending, and that was sort of a necessary corrective, I guess.
Well, it works is the thing. Like if it didn't work, it could be irritating, but it all plays. And I think a big part of this, we'll talk about the ending shortly, is this aspect of the game, which, one of the most important, one of the best, the squad interactions, the character development, the writing for these characters, the arcs that each individual character is on, is one of the most important things about the game. It's what everyone loved about this, among other things, but that it's certainly at the top of most people's list is how much fun it was to spend time with the characters and how much you cared about them by the end. A lot of that is not serviced particularly well by the end of the game. That has sort of a singular focus on certain things, but not that. And so this was needed. This is the only DLC that was developed after the reaction to the end. Omega and Leviathan were already being worked on.
There was the extended cut DLC too that just expanded the ending to give some more cutscenes and whatnot.
Oh,
so I guess that was technically, but it's harder, especially 12 years later, to like remember exactly what that added and what was there originally. Whereas it's pretty
well. The big montage is the main thing. The main thing is the big little montage that each ending comes with. But there was definitely a need to spend more time with these characters and give them, not necessarily, this doesn't really complete anyone's arc per se, but it kind of leaves everyone in a landing position, I guess.
Yeah.
The
only thing it kind of completes is it gives you some added romance material, which not necessarily completes things, but it's really well done. And there's fun stuff here, that the casino infiltration aspect of it. There's a heist at a casino. It's
great.
It's kind of polished version of the Kasumi loyalty mission from the second game. But that is quite a bit of fun. And, there's different cutscenes depending on who you take with you there as your plus one. And they're, maybe, okay. As we're getting into the back half of this, once the fighting is done. Oh, sorry. You fight an evil clone of yourself, and you kill. That's the conceit. And it's fine.
Yeah.
It turns out that
it's functional.
The clone gets a drop on you. They do some cool cinematic stuff where they lock you in the Citadel archives. But ultimately, Shepard is able to beat the clone because he has the power of friendship on his side. And the clone is up.
It's a real Buffy the Vampire Slayer kind of thing. It's
well, down to...
And that's what's...
I feel like the Citadel is where the writers are indulging their sort of like Buffy the Vampire Slayer fandom, in that this is where they allow themselves to be really sort of meta and winking about their own like history of the series and the writing peccadillos, and there's a lot.
Probably
got too many meta jokes about Garrus saying, I probably say the word calibrations too much, and everybody teasing Shepard for being a bad dancer, and like Shepard talking about like, I do always say I should go when I end a conversation, like it's all very winking. There's one like really tiny bit of it, actually, that my favorite bit of it, of that type of thing, you can meet the Asari consort in the casino when you're doing the infiltration.
From the first game. Oh my god! Oh
and,
wow, that's great.
One of like the many. There's like 12 different sort of places you can go to quote unquote mingle. Is like the order you enter into the controller to mingle and wait for the security to pass by. And one of the people you can talk to is the consort, and she like recognizes you, and you can ask her if she has any advice for you now after she'd done sort of overwrought. You are laden with a great destiny stuff in the first game. And this game, you ask her like, you have any advice for me now? And she goes, and all she says is win. So anyway.
Okay. Yeah. Cute.
Once we kill off the clone and everything, you can have throw a party in Anderson's apartment for your entire crew. Everybody who survived from the last game or this game. And that is what I think people love the most. There's no shooting, not much gameplay. It's just walking around talking to all your people, and the party writing there. It's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. It's fun, yeah. I was expecting another shootout there. Actually, I was thinking like we're gonna do some sort of tower defense kind of thing where people infiltrate the apartment. It's just too cool a set not to use in that way, but it's not necessary. You don't need that at all. In fact, it'd probably be like Gilding of the Lily.
Certainly not if you've done Omega already.
Yeah, for sure. But it's really funny. I mean, yeah, cute jokes aside, this is definitely some of the funniest material in the game, and it's based on how well you know everybody. There's a lot of as you could call it fan service, but you could also call it how well you know these characters at this point. There's scenes of Jacob talking to I don't know who's another character,
to Vega,
Joker. Yeah, that is funny because I know these characters. It's the first time Kasumi's been really, really funny and well used since her recruitment mission. Like it's everyone's kind of at their best here, and yeah, you can kind of devise scenarios that are surprising. Drunk Tally.
Yes. I mean, and that's
shows up again.
That's what I think was fun. They give you an option to throw two different types of party. You can do a more of a rager or a more reserved affair. And I just can't wrap my head around. I mean, as much as I can't understand like people who let Tally die or anything, I can't imagine possibly choosing let's do a quiet gathering option.
Sort of a respectful adult party. Yes.
But they said the Kasumi stuff's great. She's using her invisibility cloak and just popping up at random places as you're exploring the party, and you find her like rooting through your underwear drawer and commenting on Shepard's briefs. And there's a great point where James has challenged people to a push-up contest, and he's struggling to beat Jacob, and that seems weird because James is just a big muscle man. And then she pops into visibility, sitting on James's back to sabotage him. That's fun stuff. I mean, just you say that everybody's kind of at their best here. That is kind of almost entirely true, except for Caden.
Well, what's Caden's best?
Exactly. I watched a video of like all the different permutations of this party because I was just curious how many different things they got. And so I was treated to sort of what the party looks like if you're romancing Caden. And there you get quite a bit of Caden trying to be sexy and doing pillow talk the morning after and everything. I was like, oh, no, this. Yeah, but that's, again, it's not Caden at his best, but it is at his most. Another just like minor thing to zoom in on. There's a part where, it becomes a dance party and everybody's dancing on two different floors and whatever. And the amount of like individualized dancing animations they have done and like tailored to these characters is great.
Yeah.
Like, Liara just kind of has this drunken sway, and James is completely uninhibited and bouncing around, and Caden has the doofiest little dance moves imaginable. It is really like the dice are his only move type of thing. It's actually incredibly well observed there.
And you've also got Joker sitting sadly on the side.
Yes, but Edie will talk him into dancing.
Oh right, yeah. You can. You got to work at it though.
Yeah, there's a thing there. You can talk him into it, and then he'll get into it. And he's having a good time, and Say, it looks like you're not the only dancing machine at this party. Joker's having a good time. It's a good bit for Joker too. That we love. The Citadel's great. Everybody who's played through it knows this. It's kind of everybody's favorite, and because it's fan servicey, and because it's good, like you said.
Well done, fan service. Well done. That's the thing. Like, it would be irritating if it was poorly done, but they knew they had to get that right, and it's something they've always been good at, character writing. So it kind of comes to bear, in the clutch, I guess you'd say. Now, if you play Citadel now, it is not the last thing you do. It is, of course, before the end of the game. Do you think that has the effect of improving the end? I don't know. Well, I mean, that's a freighted conversation as well, because we kind of like.
I think in Legendary Edition, it's the last thing I do before initiating the end game, and at that point,
it's the way to do it. Yeah,
through 3 games of this, and I know how the ending's going to play out. So I think it still functions for you that way. You're right. If it's your first time through, it might feel a little awkward in terms of pacing to suddenly be this frivolous. Well, right as the apocalyptic stakes are coming to fruition.
It's needed though. It's the last good episode of Game of Thrones was the night before the battle with the whites at Winterfell. It's just the characters hanging out, talking about how far they've come. I think that's right before the wheels kind of came off the wagon. They were still doing what they did well at that point. That's what Citadel is. That's a
very good point of comparison. And the first of many comparisons to Game of Thrones that are going to come over the next 45 minutes to an hour.
It does compare, doesn't it? I mean, just the fan reaction alone. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Before we leave the Citadel, there is some more stuff after the party, actually, that you can do individualized meetups with the different party members. There's some nice stuff where, like, Liara will teach you to play the main theme from Mass Effect 1 on the piano. It is nice. The best of the out of romance stuff there is Jack will come and give you a tattoo as a romantic gesture that is actually very sweet the way it plays out. And she's sort of,
oh wow, that's cool. Does it stay on, or is it like on your chest?
Well, it's under your back shoulder, so you're not going to see it under the armor. But I thought you would romance Jack. I thought you had seen it all.
I mean, I think when I romanced Jack, there wasn't a Mass Effect 3 Citadel, I believe. Yeah.
Well, she says she wants to give you a tattoo and you go along with it. And, you're kind of teasing her about it. And she's getting like kind of emotional about it. And gradually reveals that it's a marker. She wants to mark you so that if you're lying, dying on a field of carnage somewhere, that somebody will be able to identify you and know that you're hers. And it's very sweet.
That's good. Yeah. It's good.
They got this stuff down now. Yeah. The other thing to mention about that is Grunt is just absolutely glorious in this the whole Citadel thing. He's at the party. He's going the hardest of anybody. Halfway through, he's like passing out in the shower. You meet him up afterwards. You have to bail him out of jail. And there's this, because his friends, his Krogan friends had busted him out of the hospital. And there's a great cutaway gag of seeing just like a Solarian doctor working in the hospital set that you've been to a bunch of times. And you just hear like breaking glass and then see him like falling and screaming past the window behind his shoulder. And then they're like drunkenly climbing up on the Krogan statue in the Presidium and stealing police cars. It's just, it's wonderful Grunt stuff. It's exactly what you want from him.
There's some other fun stuff going on in the non-apartment parts of Citadel. The Blasto sequence, fantastic stuff. All that is great. I mean, it's fun to get like a real payoff to what amounts to basically wall ads. You've been seeing the whole game of the Blasto action movie. You come to find the shooting of it and have a conversation with the actor playing Blasto. That's fun. This, of course, being sort of a Lethal Weapon version in a new version of Lethal Weapon in the Mass Effect universe, starring one of the
Ahanar.
The Ahanar, which are the jellyfish people,
right?
And the sort of empathic jellyfish. Sort of
right, that can't emote very well. Yeah. So having them deliver dirty, hairy dialogue is just funny in context. Oh, it's
Does he
also
have
funny.
an L-Core partner too. Is that right? Yeah.
Maybe they added that.
Doubling up on the ones that talk weird. Yeah.
But you can meet up with almost everybody. There's an arcade you can go to, and you find Zaid losing his shit over a claw game that he can't beat, which is fun.
There is a really good sort of a arena battle system, like it's.
I have heard that. I had never touched the arena battle that was like the DLC for ME1, or like at this point, whatever. It's 75 hours into this campaign. I don't have time for this shit.
That's the problem.
Not now.
There's no, you don't want to do this at the end, but you could get really deep into the this arena system. It's like one of the better ones I've seen in games. Usually I don't like arenas, where it's just like, how many points can you score against these waves? But this is one of the better ones. It's so similar in some ways to the original multiplayer games that came with Mass Effect 3 that is no longer available. But it's there's a tier system. There's kind of good rewards. You can kind of, it's similar, but coming where it does at the end of this experience, you're just like, well, this, this kind of would have been fun been playing from the beginning, but I'm not going to devote 20 hours into this now, right before the end of Mass Effect 3. It's just sort of
which I guess you can access it like in the first act.
Yes, but you don't want to do that.
Yeah, because you don't want to do the party before you've gathered up everybody from doing all the first act and second act stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's it for the party. That's the send off. It's great. We should move on to the actual end game.
Yeah.
Of the trilogy. Mm-hmm. So the last thing we do after you have the confrontation with Miranda's father at Sanctuary, Miranda either dies there or has died previously, or lives, but she, one way or another, had run into Kai Lang there, and she planted a tracker on Kai Lang, which will lead us back to the Elusive Man's secret base, which, as we noted last time, Miranda has also been to in person before, so she didn't need to do it that way. But nonetheless, we now have the location for the Cerberus headquarters, and we can finally go try and kill them off for good. Mm-hmm. And Admiral Hackett comes on and said, by the way, once you do that, we're probably going to have to go straight to Earth. So, make sure you've crossed all your T's and dotted your I's before you initiate this.
Mass Effect very good at letting you know when you're about to cross a threshold for the most part, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So we go there. You get some, fun cutscenes and of space combat, and you fight your way through the base to get to the Elusive Man's, secret lair in front of the exploding sun in the background that we've seen many times throughout the last two games.
It's good visual. Yeah,
you can learn some interesting stuff. You can see some video logs about the sort of resurrection of Shepard, the creation of Edie. Find out that Edie was the rogue virtual intelligence that you fought on Earth's moon in the first game. Sort of like the initial material they used to build Edie out of, which is fine. Doesn't change that much, but it's kind of cool just to have a callback there. And there's stuff that we kind of could have gathered previously that you see Elusive Man specifically talking about stalking the Normandy with the friendliest faces Cerberus can muster in the second game to get Shepard on board.
Now, I feel like it feels like there was a reveal missing of the Elusive Man's original insidious plan when he resurrected Shepard in the second game. There's not, right?
It's all just pretty much on
exactly what he says he is. He has to kind of get indoctrinated to really become a villain in this franchise. There's not like something that we're missing in that early game.
Not really. I mean, because he's kind of upfront about it. I'm using you for this purpose. But that purpose was what it was until in the third game is when he starts to really get indoctrinated, I think. Once they salvage whatever they can at the collector base, and that's where he starts getting exposed more directly to things. And then some of the logs here show you also him getting like cybernetic implants based on the Reaper technology they've salvaged, which is what sort of pushes him over to his final form in this game.
Pretty fucking dumb. Yeah.
Yep. There is some here. There's really dark, possibly. And it's a pretty narrow path you have to go where you have to have Jack survive Mass Effect 2, but also have skipped the Grissom Academy mission from this game.
Oh, wow.
Early
Okay.
on. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't get her out of there, you can find audio logs of her having been captured by Cerberus. And then towards the end of the level, one of the phantoms that you appear will be named Jack, much like one of the banshees can be named Morinth.
Oh, wow.
In the end. And also, if you sold Legion to Cerberus in Mass Effect 2, there is one of like their sniper things is titled Legion Assassin, which I guess doesn't really mean anything to you if you sold a Legion off without having ever talked to him, except like who does that? Nobody does that the first time through.
That's a fifth time through or something. You do.
Exactly. But the Jack thing is pretty dark. You hear them sort of like torturing her in the logs.
Don't like that at all. Fuck, that sucks. Okay, cool. The main thing that happens here is you get to kill Kai Lang.
Yes. Which I don't remember how much we talked about Kai Lang previously, but he sucks.
We said he sucks, yeah.
Yeah, he's a Mortal Kombat cyborg, which, belongs in an arcade game in 1994, not in an RPG game in 2012 that is set in 2184. And so there's many reasons to hate him. He comes on. I mean, you have to take scripted losses to him at different points in the game, which is the worst. People find frustrating, but I'm okay with that. What's annoying is that he also cheats during those. Like there's just stages of fights where you can't hurt him no matter how much you shoot him or whatever, and he's just sitting there invincible. And then
the vocal performance, it doesn't, maybe that's what they're going for, but it's just like, ha ha, Shepard, you can't get me. And it's just that irritating. Just like, oh, fuck this guy.
Yeah. His taunts, they're real nanny boo-boo shit.
Yeah.
And so there's many reasons to hate him, but between the taunting you and the inability to hurt him, like, yes, there's some weeb shit here that is easy to hate, but also in video game lineage, he's got quite a bit of the Duck Hunt dog in him.
Sure.
Take it all the way back. And that makes it just everything is it's a very irritating package.
Is there a way to make this character cool? I mean, the elusive man's personal ninja that's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Stay tuned. I don't know if I can make him cool, but I can make him better and more involved earlier on, such that Shepard has a more relationship with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would help.
But that's something for when we talk about the final sort of like leg of the adaptation. Right now, we have to do the Assault on Earth ending.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So we go to Earth, and So the idea now, we have discovered from the elusive man's base that what the information he stole from the place on Thessia when we took the scripted loss to Kai Lang there, which is that the Crucible is the catalyst, and there's just so many. No, sorry. The Citadel is the catalyst for the Crucible. There's so many like capital C proper nouns here to deal with.
The Citadel is the catalyst for the Crucible.
Yes.
The Citadel is the catalyst for the Crucible.
So we need the Citadel to get the Crucible to work and kill the Reapers off. But the Elusive Man is indoctrinated, has already like told them about that, and the Reapers and the Elusive Man have moved the Citadel into orbit over Earth, which is kind of a very sudden thing. It's like, I didn't know you could do that. And they don't show it happening. I kind of like that, actually, that element of sort of at the last 11th hour here, still having oh shit, they can do that type of thing. And like, we don't even know. Some people I think find that to be a cheat, but I kind of like that. Well, they're still pulling surprises on me.
I want more, a little bit more, I think, of just sort of Emperor Palpatine shit, where it's like, oh, you thought that you could lower the defense shields, did you? You know, that kind of third act, like, oh shit kind of stuff. There's some good stuff in here. They could use a touch more, maybe.
Maybe it's just that now, having spent 40 hours just blasting my way through Reapers, that a lot of the mystique has gone off of them. So having them pull something off.
It is a problem. It is a problem. Yeah.
Getting them one last thing of like demonstration that they have powers beyond ours is all right with me in concept.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is, I think, an aspect of the problem with the end here. So, yeah, this is related to what we were talking about earlier with the Cosmic Core, which, the more you see these guys, the Reapers, the less effectively they function as this sort of all-powerful threat. And this being a video game, you have to defeat them, and I think the game struggles quite a bit with this. I like the ending more than a lot of people, but it's not perfect, and this is a big part of it, I think. is just as an existential threat. It's tough to shoot your way out of it, and they know this on some level, so they have to kind of figure it out, And I think they do an okay job of figuring out, but it is not you're kind of not really facing the Reapers ultimately, because it's impossible to make that satisfying. How many it also minimizes your successes against them. It's a big deal when you take down a Reaper. I think it happens 3 times prior to the end of the game, right?
And they have now introduced that there's 2 types of Reapers. They don't make this explicit, but there's like a smaller destroyer thing that is.
I assume there's like entire different like tasks and flotillas, and they all serve different purposes of sorts, I imagine.
I would like that. And it does seem like Mass Effect 2, when they're talking about the Reapers making new Reapers out of every harvested species, that would make sense for there to be lots of different varieties of them. But it seems like for the full-size Reapers, there's the big Sovereign / Harbinger giant squid. And then there's a smaller one that looks like it's about a quarter of that size, that are the ones that we took down on Rannoch and with the giant Thresher Maw on Tachanka.
It's interesting they never nailed that down, even in the Codex.
Yeah. I feel like there's mention of destroyer types or something somewhere. Also, the one you shoot with the truck-mounted missile at the end of this is the smaller version too. And nowhere in any of this, I feel like, do we really maybe see one of the full-size Reapers getting blown up since Sovereign.
Yeah, maybe like in space. I'm not sure. They realize the problem they're up against. It's not satisfying to just shoot these things down, and it can be when it can be when it's like you against one, and there's a goal, and it's a big undertaking, but got a field of them, flying through infinite space. How are you going to make that work exactly? You got to come up with something like the Crucible, and as to how successful that is as a villain. There's no boss at the end of Mass Effect that you have to fight.
Well, I was going to mention that there was a boss at the end of Mass Effect 1. In Mass Effect 3, there is not. And so this final sequence on Earth, where you're just fighting your way through the blasted streets of London. It's not the most visually interesting scenario to be in. And I guess they didn't want to just rerun the suicide mission from 2, but they could have reused some of the squad assignment mechanics there. Would have been much better.
A version of the suicide mission probably would have been a good idea. You have less of a squad this time to play with, but even still, if your actions determine whether Garrus or Tally die, I think you're going to care. I think it's going to matter.
There is.
You can't lose any of your friends at the end of this.
You can, but it feels like a letdown after suicide mission for sure, because not just is it missing those assignment mechanics, but you go from potentially losing up to 12 squad mates and Shepard herself to, like, technically there are some checks to see, like, you can lose Cortez in a shuttle crash.
That's not scripted. I've always lost Cortez.
No, he survives if you have like talked to him on the Citadel once, basically to avoid it.
Shit.
So I think most people will just do that and also like not realize that they dodged any kind of bullet when it happened. So that's not satisfying as sort of seeing the moments like we talked about in Mass Effect 2. They set up the sort of cinematic language of showing you when somebody might be about to die. And then you kind of have a sense of, oh, but I made the right decisions and they were loyal. And that's why they survived that last shot or whatever. You don't really have that there. And it's like, if you didn't care enough about Cortez to talk to him about his dead husband on the Citadel, then, which is like the thing that triggers whether he lives or dies, then you're not going to care that he dies. Right. And then, so I did finally do a whole third playthrough where of this, the whole trilogy, where I did nothing but the main story missions, like no side content. There's some elements like Mass Effect 2 where you had to, like, you can't progress without completing a certain number of missions. So, and also I needed to keep 2 people alive so Shepard didn't die.
Right.
So I had done like a couple of loyalty missions, but what it was amounted to is this super low war asset run. It was kind of interesting. There were entirely new cutscenes I had not seen in 4 or 5 other playthroughs of the fleets kind of getting wrecked by Reapers as we're showing up at Earth.
create maybe a more desperate situation? Is it kind of more
it's
dramatic?
kind of better. I kind of wish that was just you saw the Reapers crawling on top of this Turian dreadnought and tearing it apart.
Interesting. That is interesting because it doesn't you don't appreciate that you've avoided that necessarily if you're just kind of playing the game normally.
Yeah. And it's weird. I mean, this is kind of a shame that we'll talk about more here, but we mentioned last time how there's a phenomenon in games or other, I guess like TV too, like the way that, the pilot episode is kind of the most fussed over version of it. And the opening levels of a video game are the most polished. And then towards the end, sometimes it's not as polished. I think that was a huge mistake for them to think that they could rush the ending of this trilogy, given what it was and what it had been built up as over the course of the prior 5 years. But, they had new corporate overlords at this point, and Bioware didn't get to make all those calls on their own terms. But so basically, there's one ambient conversation in the final, forward base in London there, where you're just walking by, you can hear a medic talking through someone on a radio about how to put a tourniquet on some injured comrade of theirs. Mm-hmm. And in a normal run where you have normal war assets, it is this kind of drawn out thing where there's 4 or 5 beats of back and forth there. Talking him into all right, keep him hidden and we'll try and get you help. And then the low asset version, you hear him he just asks her if she can find a pulse and she says, no, I can't find one. Oh, I'm sorry, he's gone. It's just over immediately. That affects nothing war assets, nothing no points, blah, blah, blah. It's just a little bit of ambient storytelling. And it's it feels like there should be a half dozen of those and not just one. But
that should be happening whether you have the war assets or not. Yeah.
Well, I like there being little differences in the dialogue.
I get that. But the more desperate the situation at the end of the game, I think the better it works. I mean, just obviously, if you are really pulling something out at the end, it's going to feel more satisfying than it is yes, I have all my war assets in place. I have achieved the optimal version of this ending. I will have the best results possible in all cases. And I guess there's an appeal to that. I mean, obviously people wanted a different ending for all the work they put into it. So obviously people do want the optimal version to be accessible. But
sure. And you mentioned to me that you kind of want to be an overpowered god by the end of an RPG.
I do.
That is where the status of this as an RPG video game and the status of it as an epic space opera cinematic narrative are at odds.
Right. Yeah. That's true. And that's a gaming issue. I mean, that's something that's a tough needle to thread in any video game, especially the third game in a trilogy of, space RPGs. So yeah. No wonder this was so hard for everyone. It's quite an ask to end this story.
But especially the other way you can lose people here is at the very end, after you've done the last fight with all the banshees and everything. I mean, the lack of a boss fight there, it does mean that this big battle on Earth, it feels very samey gameplay wise compared to the collector base mission. Which had very identifiable. Mm-hmm. Here's the vent section. Here's the long walk with the bionic shield section, and the boss fight there wasn't very good.
No, that's the thing. Yeah.
But what here is just an extra strong wave of the regular enemies you've been fighting for dozens of hours. That's your final fight here, and you had that thing I mentioned previously of other missions, not really realizing when a mission is climaxing. Is this the end? Because there's not a boss to sort of indicate to me.
I mean, it gets around it. I don't actually miss the boss necessarily, and because first off, I don't know what you'd be able to fight that would be satisfying. I'm not sure. I don't know if a fucking elusive man turned into some sort of Akira monster. Maybe that's something, but really, I kind of prefer what they do with him anyway. It's tough to kind of figure that out. They struggled in Mass Effect 2, obviously, to figure out what the last boss of such a thing should be, and I think they do make the right choice, which is to make it. Make the actual gameplay of the finale based on, the dialogue wheel, essentially. That's kind of where it lives, even as I love the fighting in these games. That works for me. The hardest thing in the whole fucking game, honestly, is running towards that light beam at the end.
Yeah. Well, is limping towards it after the thing. All right. So maybe we should recap here. So you're trying to get to this beam of light in London that is going from London up to the Citadel.
Yeah,
that is going to
transfer beam.
Yeah, it's a transport beam. It's going to shoot you up the Citadel, so you can open up the arms of the Citadel, and they can bring the Crucible into dock there and set it off. Okay, fine. Now you fight your way through that stuff. I mean, honestly, they could have just let you take out a full-size Reaper in front of that beam instead of the small size that you already did on Tachanka and Rannoch. That would be it for a boss, I suppose.
I wouldn't have said no. No.
So now there's like this big open like hill sloping down towards this beam of light that you have to kind of go run across no man's land there. And when you're doing that, this is where you can lose people in this mission. If your war assets are low enough, halfway down the slope, your other team will they'll flip over, a truck will get blown up next to them, and in the regular version, the Normandy can come down and scoop up the injured teammates of yours and take them away. But if your assets are too low, then Harbinger will fire a laser beam and just vaporize them in front of you. And that's rough.
Because this is your last run, so you've probably taken your most important buds here.
Yeah, exactly.
Garrison and Tally or Arya, yeah, not Arya.
Liara,
yeah.
Well, I took my low war asset mission. I kind of knew what was coming, so I took James, who I didn't care about, and Edie, who I was going to kill in the destroy ending anyway.
Clever.
But then, so in this doing no side content, I only had 4 potential squad mates through the entire game. So I lost 2 of them there, and then I kept Ashley and Liara on the ship because I'd hoped they would live. But now the Normandy gets blown up at the end too because I was so low. Good. So nobody lived.
All right. That's good.
Anyway, that's a
total party kill. You lose everybody that way. That's great.
I did. It was great. And all of Earth, by the way, gets destroyed.
Wow. There's more variety than I realized. That's cool.
Well, that's the thing. But this is what we've gone over in previous ones, is that the only way to access this variety is by doing less of the game, which is just a weird technical thing. You have to really aim for it.
To intentionally do it badly. To intentionally do what they don't want you to do. That is tough. Yeah.
So anyway, in a normal course of events where you have a reasonable amount of war assets, you can get a tearful goodbye with your injured love interest as you're loading around to the Normandy, and then you go back to running down the hill. It's still pretty grossly irresponsible for you as a soldier with all of the fate of every organic species in the galaxy riding on it, to take that time away from pursuing your goal there to do that. But come on, we want that final moment with our love interest. But then as you're getting really close to the beam, you get blasted to shit by the Reaper. And then Shepard comes back to consciousness, is just a total wreck. I love the design of the mangled Shepard. The way the armor is sort of like fused into their flesh at parts, and there's bloody and wrecked. It's wonderful. You have to limp your way through there. And like you said, the hardest part of the game is there's a marauder that pops out at the last second, and you actually have to shoot with your injured arm. And it's just weirdly difficult for this last bit of I guess that's technically combat, but we're past this now.
There was one playthrough of this I had where I had not died the entire game, not a single death. And then I died 12 times at this moment, and it just reloads. You're just like, fuck. That's so irritating. There's no permadeath option in Mass Effect, but that one moment would prevent me from ever doing it, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. And then, but you limp your way up there and you get onto the beam, and it throws you up onto the Citadel. And we could actually do a cut here and just do a whole separate episode about the ending if we had to, since we've already gone so long.
And he was right. We ended up talking for quite a bit longer about the end of Mass Effect 3, and seeing as how this has already gone over an hour, we decided it was easily 2 episodes worth of content. So that will be next time we talk about Mass Effect. Will be the end of this conversation. The in-depth examination of one of the most controversial video game endings of all time, Mass Effect 3. And after that, we'll be talking about the idea of adapting it, and we're finishing up Mass Effect, and we're doing it properly. So join us next time to hear how this all ends. All right. Thanks for listening.